Welcome to the Movement Upgraded podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Hostler, licensed physical therapist and certified strength and mobility coach. Here you can expect to hear about all things movement. The Movement Upgraded podcast is a blend of the science of strength training, rehab, and mobility, mixed with the personal and professional experience to provide you with the steps you need to keep your body pain-free and moving well, so you can do what you love forever. Welcome back. We are in a new episode, and I'm really excited about this episode because
I'm here.
Because Ryan's here.
Because I'm in this episode.
Just so you know, Ryan only agreed to this podcast episode because I told him it was going to not just be a boring science
because
episode.
It's not about tissue remodeling. Here I am.
Apparently, we should never do tissue remodeling episodes with Ryan ever again.
One person really loved that podcast episode.
Yes. And
the requester.
I know that we have people listening to this who really love science, because that is what I really love, and I love learning the why. But sometimes I think it's really helpful just to hear explanations and understandings of things without being super duper sciencey. And I brought Ryan on to talk about a more nuanced, complicated topic. That's typically when I like to bring him on because I don't like to get lost in my own
You basically
thoughts.
just said you invited me on because I'm dumb, and I want to have him make things make sense to the layperson and not be sciencey.
That's not what I meant at all. That's like a whole different conversation.
Like, I'm too sciencey, and a lot of people love the science, so I'm bringing Ryan on to talk about this in a dumbed down way.
No, I feel like one, I don't want to get super duper sciencey with posture, only because that's what we're talking about today. Did we say that already?
No, we didn't. It's posture.
Well, mainly I wanted to bring Ryan on because some of my other podcasts are very cut and dry, and I think having another person on is just more interesting. And I like doing the podcast with Ryan. It's fun. And also, it's really helpful to have somebody when we're talking about something that is more nuanced. So we are talking about posture today because that is something I get asked this question a lot. I am sure Ryan's discussed this a lot with patients as well because it's just something that gets tossed around in the movement industry and in the pain rehab world. And so because it's such a common topic, I was gonna obviously make a podcast about it, but also it's something that's not just simple cut or dry yes or no. And so when something's more nuanced like that, it's really good to have a different perspective and somebody who can just like bring a little bit more, I guess, perspective, for lack of better words, to the conversation. And that's why I wanted to bring Ryan on today. So it's not because he's dumb.
Yeah. I'll interject here or there.
Yeah.
If I get a chance. No, I'll try to. No, Jen's a good talker. She's very educated, obviously. So sometimes I just am like, I'll just keep letting her go because what do I have to add? Like, she's crushing this. Like, what? I don't need to add anything. Like, she's doing great.
So we'll see how it goes.
I'll try to keep her on topic and add here and there. And then I feel like I say that every time I'm on the podcast. I'm here just to kind of guide her and add here and there. But
I mean, that's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Ryan doesn't necessarily love talking. It's not his favorite thing unless we're talking about something that's really fun, where he just can like just say things that are fun. Ryan is more of a let's just like have a good time type of guy, and I can be that way, but I'm more of a like serious type. You can see now as you're listening to this podcast our two different personalities, and I feel like we balance each other out pretty well because of that. So with that being said, let's talk about the topic today. So we're going to talk about posture, and I'm going to go down a path of bringing up different topics of posture, but maybe you've been told that your posture is to blame for your pain. Maybe you've been told your posture is to blame for your ability or inability to do a movement. Maybe you have been told your mobility restrictions are because of your posture, or you've just been told some things about posture, and I want to talk about whether or not we have evidence to support some of that, I'm not your like top of the line evidence person. I will not just like cite resources today. I'm not getting paid enough for this podcast. I'm not getting paid at all, but I'm not getting paid enough for this to like give you 100,000 resources, and I don't think you need all of those. But I am going to talk basically kind of about the consensus of what we understand about posture and how we talk about it to our clients. So the first thing that I want to talk about is...
I'm going to interrupt you even there, because another thing that's common is just people seeing this stuff on social media. Like, they just see a random post about posture, and then they think that they should be worried about it. So it's not even that they're told. They just randomly see it, and then they're like, oh, maybe this is something that I need to pay attention to. So just another thing to pay attention to, because that could be you.
I feel like there is this like general consensus that posture is really important, but we don't really know where we learned that or who's telling us that.
Yeah,
it's kind of just like the
don't
messages.
Really know why.
Yeah, it's the messages we're told, and we don't really know why we're told about that, but... I remember in physical therapy school specifically, I've shared a little bit here and there about my own pain and injury and rehab experiences, but in physical therapy school, I really developed some significant chronic neck pain and continued low back issues. And I remember thinking that I needed to like fix my posture. Unfortunately, some of the outdated information that we were taught in school, because it is on our boards exam, believe it or not. It takes a lot to change that information, like decades to change the type of content on boards. So some of the information we were taught is very outdated and not necessarily supported by research, which is very much why you see some physical therapists continuing to share that information. But I remember learning a lot about posture, and they would talk about posture and they would talk about like adjusting your posture and correcting it, quote unquote. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna, have this great posture. Like, I'm gonna have perfect posture. We're sitting all the time, I've got this neck issue. I'm gonna work on my posture. And I feel like I thought I was doing myself a service. Like, I thought really hard that I was helping myself. But I had so much worse neck pain and back pain from trying to have this perfect posture. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that I work with are the same way. They think they need to have this perfect neutral spine when they're lifting even, and what they think is neutral is actually an extreme position. So that happened to me as well, and that contributed to a lot of my pain too. And so a lot of the people we work with will be like, okay, I'm gonna perfect my posture. And what's the posture that we all the time are saying is like the perfect posture? Mm-hmm. Shoulders back, head up, back arched, right? Sitting really erect. Well, if you do that, you can feel all of your muscles in your back and neck kind of clamping down. We call that like a compression type of movement or position, versus if you're hunched over, you might feel some stretching, but your muscles relax. Neither one of those positions are worse than the other. They just are different positions, and you feel different things in them. And that's kind of what we try to teach our patients, is there's just different positions and different options. So
yeah, if you just think about what we are as humans, like, we're meant to be very dynamic. We're supposed to move. We're always supposed to be changing positions and changing postures. So maybe I'm jumping the gun here, and maybe we're ending the episode early, because really when it comes down to it, your next posture is your best posture. You should always just be continually moving in and out of posture. You should always be moving, changing positions, fidgeting, doing these things, and not being in one position. Because you could be in the perfect posture position and live in that position, but then your body can get very angry at you, because that's literally all you know, right? And we're supposed to be able to move in and out of those positions and postures to keep our body happy.
Yeah, and let's also talk back to what I was saying, because Ryan just summarized everything we're going to say in the rest of the podcast. Oops. We're going to break it down. It's totally fine. He's giving you a good, that's the too long, didn't listen to the rest of the podcast. If you ended it there, you pretty much get the gist of it. We're going to elaborate a little bit on it, because I think it's important to elaborate and discuss things in a little bit more detail. But when it comes to posture, when we talk about like what the perfect posture is, and I'm putting air quotation marks because I do that a lot and you can't hear me, but
because there's no perfect posture.
But perfect for what? Like, what are we thinking posture matters for? And a lot of the times it's touted.
Touted.
Why did that sound like a weird word?
I'm gonna learn today.
I don't know. But a lot of times it's touted as this like answer to longevity, health, and like no pain and no injuries, right? If you have this perfect posture. But if you listen to any of my other podcasts where we talk about how nuanced pain is and how injuries really happen, that doesn't make sense at all. Like
there's so many things that interact with each
pain.
Other
to
create the pain experience.
And a lot of pain has to do with variability and movement options rather than one position. So here's what I think why posture has become so, I don't know, popular.
Can we give them a refresher of all of the things that can contribute to pain?
We're going to next.
Oh man.
Oh wait, of all the things.
All of the things that can contribute to pain besides just maybe a prolonged position or posture. Right?
You want to list them all?
I can start.
Okay.
High stress, poor sleep, poor nutrition, lack of social interaction.
Your social relationships and the quality of them is really important.
Lack of drive or purpose in life.
Mm-hmm. General happiness, low tissue capacity, or not good quality tissue health, which has nothing to do with your posture as well. There's actually a little bit of research. Did we name most of them?
The majority of them. And then you can think of things like just in general posture. There's all of these things that can interact to create the experience of pain, and we like to hyper focus on a lot of times just one thing, and for the case of this podcast, like posture, it's not just likely the posture, it's the interaction of all of those other things that we listed that are likely causing the pain experience that you're
contributing to. Yeah. We talk about pain a lot as like having a cup. I love the cup analogy, and pain, you have like a pain threshold, which means like the amount of stuff in your cup, if it doesn't reach the threshold, it's not spilling over, you aren't going to have pain. But once it hits the threshold, the cup would spill over, obviously, and you would get pain. So if we think about all of the things that can contribute to pain, those things can fill up the cup. And sometimes just taking some of them out of the cup actually decreases how much pain you experience. And then sometimes just building yourself a bigger cup actually decreases how much pain you can experience, or allows you to tolerate more of those stressors or more of those things without experiencing pain. And that is more of how we approach pain and helping people rehab than just hyper focusing on the one little thing that might be adding, like the one drop that we might be adding into the cup. Like, yeah, your posture might be one drop, like the position you're in. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to break it down. That's where we're going next. But one drop as opposed to like multiple cups just pouring in there, like which one of those things seems like it's more important, and how much should we give our attention to that? I'm big on ROI with our time and energy. So how much time and energy do we need to focus on something? And there's actually a little bit of research to support that our posture is actually can be affected by our pain. So which is it, the chicken or the egg at that point, right? So like once we're in pain, we change our posture, we change what we look like. So if you have pain and you go into your physical therapist or chiropractor's office or massage therapist or your personal trainer, whoever it is that's trying to rehab you, and they're telling you, well, when you're standing you're in pain, this is your posture and that's the cause of your pain, they can't say that. They're, because of all the things Ryan and I just listed, but also because your posture may have changed now that you're in pain.
Right.
Also, your posture can change based off of your affect or like your mood and personality. There is some research to show that forward head has less correlation to do with like your pain. So forward head posture is your head really far forward compared to your body, has less to do with pain and actually doesn't correlate to how much neck pain people have. It has more to do with actually their attitude and general overall mental health or emotional state, I think it was. So people who tend to have more depression or things like that actually will have like more of a forward head posture, if I remember correctly. It's an older research article that I remembered reading, but it just goes to show you that we can't blame something so much when we don't have the evidence to support it. The reason that I feel like we have put so much emphasis on posture is twofold. One, I think that we've done this because it's easy, it's simple. And if you notice things in the podcast that I've talked about, It's just way easier to tell you that your pain is because your head's so far forward and to tell you that you just need to fix that than it is to tell you all the things we just did that, okay, let me talk to you and figure out your life and ask all these questions and be like, okay, what stress do you have? What's this? Let's set some goals. Let's figure out where in your life we're going to have the biggest ROI for our time and energy, and let's start to work on those things. That is
way easier just to say, here are 5 exercises to fix your forward head.
It's easier in the session with you, and it's easier on the internet. It's so much more popular, and it's easier for our brains to comprehend. Our brains don't like thinking hard. They don't. Our brains want to conserve energy, consume little energy. And so we don't want to think very hard. And it's hard for us to comprehend and learn a new concept that pain's complex and multifactorial. Like, just saying that, it's like, ugh, forget about that. I'm going to go to the guy who's like, no, your pain's because your shoulders are so rounded. Let's just fix those. And he just shoves your shoulders back. And then all of a sudden he's like, yeah, when I break up all of the muscle adhesions in the tissues and the scar tissue, and I do that with my hands because I am God, then I can fix your shoulders and then your pain will go away. I think that is one of the big reasons that posture has become so popular. The other reason is because I think we're obsessed with how we look, and we really like to talk about fitness and aesthetics. And when people come to me in my office and they're asking about their posture, I will always ask them they'll ask questions like, should I be worried about it? Do I need to fix it? Or how do I fix this? And I will always ask them more questions before I give them answers, because I want to know, why do you think you need to fix that? Or why do you want to fix that? More often than not, it comes from they think it's going to fix their pain or something like that. Every once in a while, it'll be, well, I don't like the way it looks, right? Like, some people have the little hump on their neck and they don't like the way it looks, and that's understandable. And so we'll talk about that. And most often when we actually have the conversation, because I'll ask more questions, their concern about the way it looks still goes back to they're worried that it will become a problem in the future for their movement and their functionality. And when it really boils down to everything, how we approach it is still very similar, because I care more about what their options are and getting them into habits that will help them in the future, more so than fixing their posture. So even if your posture is something you actually want to fix because you don't like the way it looks, you still have to start with the basics of working on regular movement, daily exercises, recovering from them, and getting general body awareness. So even then it kind of starts the same, but I would say the people that I work with, that's very minimal. And once those people realize how much work and effort it is to change their posture, and they realize that it doesn't necessarily need to change for them to feel better or to get out of pain or to do the things they want, they don't care anymore. And I will personally say that I have scoliosis, as you know, probably listening to the podcast. I'm very crooked. Like, I have a very a larger rib hump on one side. You can see it. I stand very much on my left side. My right shoulder's higher. I am very asymmetrical. And for a very long time, they were looking at my back and watching it and telling me how asymmetrical I was. And I've shared this before, but I already had some body image struggles when I was younger. And then they kept telling me how crooked I was, and I started to notice these things. And so I didn't have pain, but I started to look at how crooked I was and think, I need to fix this. Not only were they fear-mongering me and telling me my scoliosis was bad and I need to fix it because it can be a big problem, but they're also telling me that I'm crooked and that I need to fix it. And so I had so much fear and concern over my posture and how crooked I looked that I sought out, like, changing my posture, which is really boils down to another aesthetic-based pursuit of fitness. And that, when you aren't already doing the general health measures, is just like missing the forest for the trees. Is that the phrase?
I don't know that one.
But it's basically like skipping all of the big, most important things for something so minimal that won't give you much for your return investment in time. So when you are focusing on something like your shoulder being higher than the other, one hip being higher, or your foot collapsing a little bit, those are things that we've been hyper-focused on as clinicians, because it's really easy to explain things in those terms, and it's easy to tell you that's the problem. But that really can make you not trust your body and then start to hyper focus on how your body looks, and that actually interferes with your ability to stay consistent with fitness. And if you want to learn more about this, the podcast episode that just dropped before this will be a great one to listen to, where we talk about how pursuing things and trying to change the way our body looks can affect our actual results and affect our ability to stick with fitness in the long term and increase our risk for pain and injuries. But also, when we are constantly worried that we look weird or different, or we need to fix our posture, then we start to detach from our bodies a little bit. And when we don't feel comfortable in our bodies, that actually doesn't facilitate a healthy relationship with our bodies, and that's not going to make us feel very comfortable in our bodies. So you can see how that might increase our risk for pain, which is the opposite of what we're trying to actually do as healthcare providers. So that's why this episode exists, because we don't want to just talk about your posture and blame it on that, right? So I think a lot of people pursue postural changes because we have some inherent understanding through lots of messages that posture is the end all be all most important thing for reducing injury and for getting out of pain. And we're here to tell you basically that that's not true. And most of when we tell our patients is that you don't need to fix your posture to do what you want and to feel better. So let's talk then about posture a little bit, what really is your posture. So now that we've kind of gone down that path, how would you define posture?
Well, posture in of itself is a static position, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just it's the position you live in, or where you are when you're standing or in a stationary position.
So it's like a snapshot of a millisecond of your entire life.
It doesn't give you a lot, because if you ever notice, you can sit in different positions, you can stand in different positions.
I've changed my posture since we started this podcast 20 minutes ago, 20 times at least. So yeah, posture is forever changing, but I would say if you were to just stand and look at somebody's posture, that's what most people are going off of, a static position or static posture.
Yeah, and it's just the position that you're in. And when we say we don't need to change your posture, it doesn't mean we completely ignore it either. I still consider it. When I'm looking at people, I'm looking at their posture a little bit, because I want to see, okay, if there's something that is asymmetrical or different than the other side, I want to know, okay, but do they still have the ability to, what options does their body have? Mm-hmm. So when it comes to getting out of pain and being able to do the things you want, it always boils down to movement. Can you move in the way that you want to and need to do the things you want? And then on top of that, do you have the strength and tissue capacity built up to be able to withstand the things that you want to be able to do? So when we are looking at people, we'll still look at their posture a little bit to give us an idea on just some things to consider or pay more attention to. But what we really care about is, what is your movement? So if your spine tends to be in a little more extension, or an example of an anterior pelvic tilt that we love to throw around in the fitness world as this demonized
let's even break
thing.
These down. What is an anterior pelvic tilt? What is upper back extension
versus
flexion?
Those two things are typically come together.
Yeah.
So an anterior pelvic tilt, if you think of your pelvis as a bowl, anterior pelvic tilt just means the anterior or front part is tipped forward, as if you were dumping water out of the bowl. So the bony parts of your hips, if they were dropped down towards your toes and your tailbone would lift to the ceiling, that is an anterior pelvic tilt. You cannot do that, or that movement will not occur unless your spine goes into extension, which is that compression feeling that you feel when you sit really erect and tall and shoulder blades back. That is typically what I think is demonized a lot in social media, in rehab worlds, in movement worlds. And that posture, that position is actually really important for some sports performances. Sprinters especially. You're not going to be fast if you can't get into that position and you don't have the ability to get there. So when we think about posture, it's really important to understand that it's one snapshot, and I really care, if that's the position you're in now, can you get into and out of that position? Pretty evenly. Mm-hmm. If you can move in and out of it, then where your body organizes itself in space isn't as important most of the time. There will be cases that I might change my mind For example, if you have pain, when you arch your back into that position I just explained, so if your tailbone goes up and you feel that compression, if you have pain there, and I'm watching your posture and all the things that you do, and you're always there, then I might talk to you about that posture, and I might talk to you about like maybe trying to move into a different posture for a little while because it'll make it feel better and you'll give those tissues a little time to rest. So when we're in different positions, so when I'm in that position that I explained where we're extended, our back is arched, our tailbone is up, we can feel different loads and it feels different than if I were to tuck my tailbone down and round my lower back out. That feels different because the forces now are placed differently on different structures. Neither one of those is better than the other, they're just different. But if I were to only be able to do one of those movements and not the other, then the areas that are being loaded in that one movement or that one position might get kind of angry if they're always having to get loaded and never get a break. So this is where it really boils down to what options do you have? What options does your pelvis have? Does your pelvis have the ability to tuck into a posterior pelvic tilt, which would be the top of your front of your pelvis up towards your nose, like a cue I use for that is like belt buckle towards your nose and tailbone down. If you were a dog with the tail, tuck it between your legs. That is going to be a posterior pelvic tilt and more lumbar or low back rounding. That is going to be different. And maybe you have pain in one area and not the other. And sometimes we have to move into the other a little bit. But can you move into all those? If you have all those options, that's what matters more. More options mean you're not overusing or overloading one area. You're less likely to have pain and you're less likely to have injuries because of that. And that's why it really doesn't matter what your posture is, but what movements you could do. If you look at my posture, you could make all kinds of assumptions, but you would have no idea until you assess me because my spine is so crooked, I have really weird things. My right arch completely collapses when I'm standing. Some might call that an overpronator. They might try to give me orthotics. But if they did that, I might end up with issues down the road because you can't make all these assumptions off of posture. It doesn't give you enough information. And my foot collapsing is actually what my body needs because of my hip and the placement of my hip based off of the fact that my spine's crooked. And I don't care to, nor probably will ever be able to change the fact that my spine is crooked. It's been developed that way since I was 12. I'm not changing it, and I don't need to. You don't need to change how crooked you are, or your arch collapsing, or all of those things. What you more often need to do is improve your strength, give your body more options, and then have a built-in capacity to be able to tolerate whatever it is that you want to do, whatever your goals are. So that's the end of the podcast. I'm just kidding. But that's like how we like to talk about posture, I think, in our office more so than let's just fix your posture and be on our way. Mm-hmm. So from here, I kind of want to talk about other examples that are posture related that you might not know are posture related. So like what are some other things that people talk about, throw around in the movement world that are similar to like an anterior or a posterior pelvic tilt?
The forward head that we were talking about?
Forward head posture is a good one. Yeah, so that one's really common. What are some other ones?
Rounded shoulders.
Rounded shoulders. Scapular winging is something I see a lot. I would say something called upper cross syndrome and lower cross syndrome.
That's what we just talked about.
Those are basically when people are in a forward head, rounded shoulder position, or in...
It's the fancy terminology.
It's the term. We learned this in school, by the way, as these like diagnoses. So there is a podcast episode, I don't remember which one it was, but I talk about why we typically don't diagnose people, but you can see now why that's a problem. If I were to give you an upper cross syndrome as a diagnosis, it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you jack all about how to fix any of your issues. It doesn't really even tell you why you have pain. It doesn't tell you how your body functions. It just tells you that you have some diagnosis and now that's something that you should be concerned about, that you have this another identity to wear that's a problem, and it's not helpful. And in many ways, it's actually more harmful than anything. So lower cross syndrome would be the anterior pelvic tilt, lumbar extension type of position. And again, clinicians make these diagnoses, air quotes again, off of looking at you standing. They don't actually assess you. And what you should be learning when you're going into
just standing there and looking at somebody is not an assessment?
It's not. It can be part of an assessment, but it's not the full assessment. Another example of ways that we use posture to assess is going to be x-rays. So a lot of chiropractors will just purely x-ray you and tell you that your spine is out of place or out of alignment or crooked or this or that. And they're looking at your spine posture, but you're standing. It's one snapshot. You might be standing weird. You might have put your foot in a weird position. That might not be how you normally are. You might not have felt that great that day. You might have lifted yesterday, so your spine's in a weird position. Like, by the way, your spine's not out of alignment ever, unless you will become paralyzed if it is. But these are examples of, it's not helpful information. It actually just is like really kind of, it makes you feel like you can't trust your body. It makes you feel like your body's wrong. And it's incomplete. So if you go to a clinician, all they do is x-ray you and then they prescribe information. Even if they give you exercises based off of your posture, we cannot do that. An exercise is to stimulate an adaptation. You can't know what adaptation you need until you've looked at your movement. Examples of adaptations that we're looking for are going to be maybe increased flexibility or more passive range of motion. They might be increased active range of motion or strength. They may be better endurance. They may be a tolerance to a lengthened position, things like that, right?
Better control. All of those things require you to move people's bodies or have them move to know if they are lacking. I cannot look at you and guess that you are lacking anything from just a standing or a sitting position. And clinicians that do that are, I don't really know. They have some complex about them. And they're just super smart.
And
they're just geniuses.
I'm gonna pause myself for a second and say that many of those clinicians probably mean very well. So this is not an attack on their character. It very much may be how they were taught, which is why my profession drives me crazy sometimes, because we perpetuate a lot of these things instead of going the harder route and learning how to actually work with people and coach them and create goals and educate you and spend the time. Sometimes clinicians are just taught different ways. A lot of times their hands are tied when they're in a clinic and they're working with like 8 different people at once. So there's just different reasons that happens, but just know that an exercise program that's given to you when they didn't actually look at how you move is not going to be an exercise program that is necessarily going to be helpful. It's not going to get you specific results. It may feel good because movement sometimes can, and a general approach always can feel a little bit better. But most people who come to see us have had the generalized exercise things. They weren't even assessed for the things that they are given, and they're given things and it doesn't make sense based off of what I actually assess. And it's too generalized and they need more specific approaches. Most rehab, you need a little bit more of a specific approach. Unless you're somebody who is not exercising at all, then general exercise actually can help you. Same thing with strength training.
Just doing anything
different
than what you were doing can be beneficial.
Anything different, anything a little bit more than what you were doing, yes. Right? But if you're already doing the most or doing a lot of movement, it needs to be more specific. Same thing with strength training. A lot of my clients that have multiple ailments or just don't feel strong, or they have things and they're not strength training, sometimes just getting on a general strength training program is like really helpful. And then I just tailor it to their bodies a little bit. But when you're already strength training, you're already moving, you're already kind of taking care of yourself and doing the general habits, being more specific with things like CARs and actually approaching joint mobility is where we have to go. So, anything we missed with posture?
I don't know. Let's circle back here and look at your notes, see what we got. I feel like we've covered a lot. I mean, I think that still what I said at the beginning is still the takeaway of this podcast. No perfect posture is what you need. You need continual movement in and out of different postures and always changing postures.
I wanted to actually add to that, because one of the things Ryan said is something I will say and still say, but I want to add nuance to it because I'm annoying. And the idea that your best posture is your next posture. Mm-hmm. That is a great thing to think about, is just we need more movement. More people need more movement most often, right? But also sometimes that advice falls short. Maybe I should say and also, because it's not either or, it's and. When that advice falls short, just like when we say move more, right? It's just going back to what I was kind of saying earlier. Sometimes we don't need to move more because we are already moving a lot and you're already doing all of those things. And then it means we need to move better, or we need to be more specific and more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not intentional. It is intentional, but have more strategy when it comes to what we actually need and what our bodies need. So when it comes to your posture, yes, your best posture is your next one, but a lot of people I work with don't have a lot of other postures.
Yeah.
So when we say that, yes, I want you to change positions, but like if when I ask you to move and you're
unable to do it,
and you're unable to move much of your spine, you just don't have a lot of options. You only have the one or two places or positions that you're in. And yeah, maybe completely laying down feels better, but that's just because you take the load off of your back. It's not really doing anything magical, right? And so if that's the case, this is why we do things like cars.
Spine cars
And
to
spine
get
segmentation.
That spine to
and
move where you're unable to move.
And hinge point training and things where we're trying to get every little segment to do its job, because I want you to have more options so that you can have lots of different next best postures. But if you don't have very many options, your next best posture is the same one you did 30 seconds ago, and switching back and forth between the two things you have is really not going to be helpful when we have a whole day. Not to mention, a lot of people have a low, high sensitivity or like a low tolerance because they've used the same two areas and they haven't moved much, and they have low tissue capacity and they have a low pain threshold. So it becomes easier for them to feel pain when they keep going into the same positions. This is why sometimes, and this kind of goes into form more for movement, but this is why sometimes it feels better for people who've been in fitness a long time for me to be like, okay, instead of arching your back with every movement, like every lat pull down, every row, every bent over row, every deadlift, all of your squatting, all that we cue so much is extension sometimes, and just letting people round their backs a little bit help them feel so much better, because it allows them to have more options. And so I want you to leave this podcast today to, number one, understand that posture is not the end all be all and you don't need to worry about it. What I care most is that you inject more movement throughout your day. And I want you to leave this podcast episode with permission to play around a little bit more and just move more and look for as many different postures and positions as you can. Like, instead of thinking there's this one perfect posture, I want you to approach your day and approach your movement as, how many different postures can I get into? Like, what options do I have? And like, how weird can I look? I think I've shared some of my stuff on Instagram before of me in like weird sitting postures in my seat because it feels so much better. And I think I'm still healing from the fact that in PT school, I had to sit in this like rigid chair. Like, you would think that PT school, right? Like, this is where you should learn, where they
high
should
quality stand-up desk,
yeah.
and we can walk behind a treadmill.
And there were
behind
kettlebells and then walking desks, and it was great, and it was like so conducive to all the things we preach about. But some of the profession, I feel like, is very hypocritical, and we were stuck in these like rigid desks and rigid seats, and we would only get an occasional break here and there, which was really frustrating. So because of that, I now try to get into weird positions all the time, and I feel like my body feels so much better for it. And so I want to give you permission to move your spine, stop babying your back, find different positions, and not be afraid of your posture and getting into a different posture and just seeing how many different positions can I ever achieve, and just explore. Like, I just want you to explore. That's it. Your body will feel better. That's what kind of cars helps us do. It's like a little more intentional, but it's a great time to practice a little bit movement exploration. So I think that's a great way to end the podcast.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yes. Do your cars, work on exploring those movement options and regaining some of those movement options so you can have more options within your posture. But then also, your posture might not directly change as a result of doing cars and having more options. But that's like totally fine, because you can feel better, again, because now you have more movement options and you have different postures and more variability. You'll feel better even though your posture might not actually change.
Yes.
From a static.
That's a really important
From a
point.
static, like, looking at your posture. But, like, you'll still have more options and variability within your posture itself.
I think that's a really important point to add. Yeah. I also...
A lot of people would be like, this isn't working. Like, I'm doing my cars, like, my posture's not changing. Well,
yes.
your posture
Posture's
might
not the result you should be looking for.
How do you feel? Like, do you feel better?
Go back to my last podcast episode, where we talk about how to understand function over just like aesthetics and what things look like. That will help you get a better idea, because we miss the results we actually have when we are hyper focused on one single result, and it's the wrong one very often. Like, your posture isn't the result most of you, we're making assumptions here, but it's not the result that you are actually seeking. It's what you think posture will provide for you. And most of us think that because of things we've been told, and it's not true and it's not supported. So, yeah. There was one thing I wanted to add to that, and now I already forgot. Oh, I do remember it. I think you can hear all this and be like, that's great, Jen, but I still follow a lot of providers and personal trainers and clinicians on social media, and they show before and afters of posture all the time. And I think this is why I wanted to bring this up very much, is because I can, within one session, tell my patient to move into a different position and take a before and after picture, and suddenly I am a magician and they've fixed their posture. You need to understand that, one, in session, so like right then and there, posture changes can happen when you just cue somebody and tell them to stand differently. Two, it may not be the reason that they feel better. A lot of clinicians show this,
and that
because
picture in itself isn't even telling you if they feel better.
Yes.
It's just look
sometimes
at the posture change.
Sometimes they will show that, but sometimes they will also show that with information about their patient improving, right?
Fair.
And I think it's hard in our profession to show results, because the results are so much like subjective. Like, I feel better, this and that. And sometimes we can take videos, but videos are cumbersome. Not everybody wants to be recorded, and it's hard to remember that. So I understand why clinicians and people do this. But I just want you to know that, like, I think the postural transformation photos in the movement world and rehab world are very similar to the fitness transformation photos in the fitness world. I don't know if it is always going to be beneficial, and I don't know if it does more benefit than it actually does harm in reinforcing the idea that we are fragile, so fragile that our posture is going to affect how our pain is, and to make us reinforce the idea that you have to get out of a position or change your posture to feel better. So if you follow people like that, they're not bad people, but I just think it's really important for you to either understand that even if that person got better, it may not have anything to do with their posture changing, but also too, they may have changed their posture just because they feel better, or they may have changed their posture because they were told something about how to change their posture and they just stood differently. I can change my posture very quickly all the time now because I have different options and I know how to do that. So it's just because you hear what we say and you're like, I hear you, the evidence doesn't support that, blah, 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 but I keep seeing it. Unfortunately, we will keep seeing it because it's very popular. People love to see it. It goes back to that simplifying, oversimplification, easy for us to see, easy for us to communicate. And so just like everything else, you don't have to follow them. You don't have to subscribe to that, and you have to just do what's really important for you. So I wanted to bring that up because that is very prevalent in the industry. And it's something that I don't really like personally. I don't really think it's super helpful. That's my opinion though. So do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that we should just wrap this podcast up. It was a good one.
Yeah. I agree. So
if you guys are really bored, you can go make a drinking game out of this. Every time we say posture, you take a drink. We said posture like a lot during this episode.
Now he's just repeating it, so you're going to be
posture.
Feeling
what is
great
posture?
Yeah, but hopefully this was helpful in I think demystifying some of the things about posture, and hopefully it makes you feel a little bit more empowered about not needing to change your posture. And if you really want to understand how crooked I am and you look at my Instagram, if you've ever watched me move, you'll see it. It's pretty subtle because I'm good at like compensating, but I'm very crooked, and one of the first guy to ever deadlift 4 times his body weight is more crooked than me. He has way more crooked spine. So scoliosis, people like myself, and his name was like Lamar, I believe. I might be wrong.
I don't know.
But he is a great example of how resilient our bodies can be and how much cool stuff we can do regardless of our posture. So if you love this podcast and you think somebody that you know would benefit from it, please share it to them. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do that. Don't miss an episode. And if you haven't, give us a 5-star review yet and you've been listening to these, please go hit that 5-star review, leave one. I appreciate you so much if you've already done that. And if there's anything you absolutely loved or have questions about, please reach out to us. I love hearing from you. It's very helpful. You can reach out at my email, jen@movementupgraded.com, or Instagram @JenHostler. That being said, I will catch you on the next episode. Thanks, Ryan, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.